Like these are real photographs.
Okay, real photographs. Good. Deja, what evidence on the front cover allows us to know that this is the past, not the present?
The title and the color, the black and white.
Okay, black and white. Good. What other evidence shows us that, Melvin, that it's the past?
They have old things, they have like those forts, they don't have like LEDs of TV.
Excellent. Good. Open up to the table of contents. Daniel, when you're reading a story on your own, do you skip the table of contents or should you always pay attention to it?
You should always pay attention to it because it has like chapters in it.
Good. And I'm noticing that it says glossary, Deja. What is the glossary going to help you with?
Where it tells you like the words that you don't know, you can go to the back of the book in the glossary, and then it'll tell you the word that that is kind of hard in the book, and then it'll tell you the definition of it.
Good. And Rami, if you get to a word that you don't know, do you have to wait till the very end to look in the glossary, or can you keep flipping back and forth?
You can keep flipping back and forth.
Good. Okay, so we're going to start with a divided country part. So what page are we turning to based off of this? Page 2. Okay. Let's open up to page 2. Before we start, I also want you to notice that throughout this book, some of the text features here that will help you. You're going to see some photographs. You're going to see captions. What I also like about this book is you're going to notice quotes. In the blue box, what do quotes mean? What does that tell you? Rami?
A fact.
It might give you a fact, okay? Deja, what does quotes tend to make you think of?
When someone's talking about their self and like what it felt like or something.
Exactly, a first-hand account, okay? So I'm going to start to read. I want you to look and listen, and then we'll choral read together. A divided country. When you think of a war, you might imagine soldiers from different countries fighting each other. But wars aren't always fought between countries. Sometimes groups of people from the same country go to war. This kind of fight is known as a civil war. Nearly 150 years ago, soldiers in our country faced each other in the American Civil War. It took place from 1861 to 1865 and was the bloodiest war in our history. The fight was between two regions, the North and the South. Read the next paragraph with me. During the Civil War, Southern and Northern soldiers suffered greatly. The fighting was hard and bloody. Friends became enemies. When it was all over, hundreds of thousands of men were hurt. Many more lost their lives. Good. I'm going to have you continue on your own reading. When I get to you, the questions that I'm going to ask you, not only do I want you to use your background knowledge, but I want you today to make sure you give me evidence from the text. What does that mean? You're going to have to do part.
You have to try to go forward and back to get the evidence from the book.
Right, you're going to have to give me proof, either from a picture, from a paragraph, so that I know you're not only using what you already know, but also what the author is helping us with, okay?
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
It took 4 years to it to end.
Yes.
Mostly, it takes about a month from war to end.
Okay, so what in the book struck you about that?
When it said it took place from 1861 to 1865 and was the bloodiest war in our history.
Okay, so does that give you a visual of what people actually had to go through then? Good. Deja?
That sounds like the story that we read for Memorial Day, like when they died trying to help our country.
Absolutely. So I like how you connected this story with another story we read, because a lot of times when you read two things, it could be 2 different days you read them. Text to text, exactly. You make that connection about how they're similar and what people have gone through. Good. Part.
I'm confused between the blue guys and this brownish color.
Okay.
Which one is north and south?
Good question. So let's go back to the text. Parth wants to know who's in blue, who's in that kind of brownish gray color. Daniel, what could we use from the page to help us with that?
You can like go to another pages.
Okay, possibly other pages. Melvin, what would you do in order to understand who is in this illustration? Okay, the flag might be an indication. Rami, what else could you use?
Their uniforms.
Okay, think about what we've talked about with pictures. What helps explain the picture? Part?
Usually this caption.
Okay, why don't we, before we go on and read, why don't we all read that caption together?
During the Civil War, soldiers from the North wore blue uniforms,
and soldiers from the South wore gray. So there we go. So, pardon, now let's go back. Now that we have that from the text, blue is the North, which would mean this group is South. South. Good question. Okay.
Blue means it's like American.
Okay, so
The flag.
this is a good question. I'm gonna actually have you use that question that Deja just asked to guide you in your reading. She wants to know, does that mean that blue are the Americans? I want you to, as you read, decide, is only one group the Americans and the other group is something else? Or are they all Americans? So as you read, I want you to find the answer, and then when I get to you, if you find it, you're gonna tell me, okay?
I don't think so, because they said in the story that, you might imagine soldiers from different countries fighting each other, but this war was from the same country, so I think they're the same religion as the North and South.
Exactly, so they're all Americans, I like how you use the text, fighting against each other. Northern states, southern states. So you could be from Illinois, and you could be fighting somebody that's from Kentucky. And you can be fighting against each other. Yeah.
That's one of our group.
In social studies, that's your state report. See? So now I had another connection. Good. Okay, so let's start to read, and when I come to you, I'm going to be listening to you read and listening and asking you some questions and then giving you your script. Okay? So go ahead on your own. Please, you go ahead and start to read for me on that.
Both sides counted on friends and family left at home. And the North and the South people on the home front provided supplies such as guns, uniforms, and food. More than that, people at home provided hope. They cheered on their troops as they marched off. Loving letters from wives, parents, sisters, and children helped keep up spirits. Many of the younger soldiers had never been away from home before. Knowing their families were thinking of them helped them stay brave during the long years of fighting.
Okay, so you and I already know from our background knowledge that your family cares about you and your family loves you. But after reading this, what does the author tell us about how the family showed that love? What did they tell us?
By taking all the bad things out of their homes, so they could get rid of the spirits and stuff like that.
Well, let's go back to that word spirits here. It says they helped keep up spirits. What does that mean? That's a little bit different than I think what you're thinking. If I try to keep up your spirit, what am I trying to do for you?
To be brave.
Okay, so I help you to be brave. How else am I helping you? If I'm keeping up your spirits.
Don't be scared and believe in yourself.
Good. And what did the author tell us the families did? What specific things did they do for them?
They're writing notes and thinking of them, and
No, you're right. They were giving letters. Let's go back to this paragraph a minute. Did they do anything else for them?
they then the North and the South provided supplies such as guns and uniforms and food.
Good. So the family was just as important to the soldiers as everyone else to support. Good. Continue reading on your own. Now I want you to make sure, as you read, I want you to remember that as you're reading, not only think about the soldiers, but think about how the families, because if we go back, what was the title?
The Civil War left back home.
So we always think of the soldiers, but we need to think about the family, the wives, the kids back at home, and what they were going through too during the war. Okay, good. Okay, Rami, I'm gonna see, you're on page 5?
Yeah.
Okay, start right here with Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln had spoken out against slavery when he was elected president. Southerners became afraid the government would tell them how to run their plantations. So 11 southern states broke away from seceded from the country. They named Jefferson Davis as their president and called them the
Confederacy.
Confederacy. The northern states were known as the Union. On April 12, 1861, Confederate soldiers attacked Fort Sumter in South California. The Civil War had begun.
Okay, so let's go back to what you just read. Why would Americans fight against each other?
Because they wanted slavery.
Who wanted slavery?
The Southerners.
Okay, and in this paragraph they say they wanted slavery, but do they tell us why? Did they give a specific reason why they wanted slavery in this paragraph?
No, not yet.
Okay, so in order to better understand, what could we go back and do?
Go back to the paragraph that was behind it.
Okay, so let's skim through. I see words like plantations. I see a picture here
Slavery.
of slaves, and I see the cotton fields. So thinking back to what you read in the story, what is the reason the South wanted slavery?
So should I read it right here?
Well, you could reread the whole thing, or we can look at some of the main words, and that might help us. Bold-faced words could help. They had plantations, which were farms. They had needed hundreds of workers for all their crops. So why would they want the slaves?
Oh, because they were lazy to do their own thing, so they wanted people to come and do it. So that's why they had a war.
Okay, so the farmers wanted the slaves to do it for them. Okay, so as you read, when you get to one part, you want to understand it fully. I want you to go back and remind yourself of what the reason was, because sometimes it's not on one page, it's several pages, okay? Good. Okay, Craig, I'm going to have you skip ahead a little bit. It's okay if you don't read the whole thing. Start right here.
Life on the home front. People on both sides lost husbands, fathers, and brothers. Many women and older people worked long, hard hours in factories or on farms to produce supplies for the war. Some went hungry as food ran out or was put aside for soldiers, and everyone had to find a way to continue their life in the middle of the war.
Now, I learned something new here. They're talking about people went hungry. When I think of the Civil War, I don't always think of that. What did they tell us in this story? Why were people actually going hungry during this time?
Because they don't have food too much. They don't have too much food.
Where was the food going? You don't have to know it already. Let's go back in the paragraph. When they were talking about adults being hungry, where was the food during this time?
In the war,
Where in the war? Who was getting it instead?
their husbands and brothers and fathers.
You're right, so the soldiers needed the food, and so how were people back home affected?
They were hungry and they couldn't live alive.
Okay, good. So just from the parts we've read, we haven't read that much so far, when we're seeing the photographs and when we're reading the information, does war just affect the soldiers, or does it affect everybody in the country?
It affects everybody in the country.
And what reasons did they tell us? How does it affect people besides the soldiers?
The people run out of food and they lose
And what else? They talked about losing. Who did they lose?
losing husbands, fathers, and brothers.
Okay, so everybody's affected, right? Good. So as you read more, I want you to think about what the message of this book is, what the author's trying to tell us. Some books are just about the war themselves, and we read about those, but some books are going to be talking about what other people go through. And I want you to look for that as you go along, okay? Good. Daniel, I'm going to flip you. Can you start to read right here for me?
The South at work. When the Civil War started, many people in the South were full of good. They believed they were fighting for the right to form a new country. But as the war dragged on year after year, they began to suffer greatly. Southern faced many problems that people in the North didn't. For one thing, most of the fighting took place in the South. Soldiers fought in southern fields around the plantation and sometimes right outside of people's homes.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. I heard a sentence that you read that confused me a little bit. It says, when the war began, people in the South were full of joy. Why would people be full of joy? What did they tell us within the paragraphs here? Why would somebody be happy about war?
They were fighting for another country.
They were fighting for another country? What country?
The South.
So, was the South another country already, or they wanted to make it another country?
They wanted to make another country.
And how do you know that? Are you just guessing, or did you use some kind of information?
I used information.
Show me the information that you used to know what the South was fighting for. I like how you're scanning, and I'm noticing that it may not be on this page.
Yeah,
Is it on this page?
Yeah,
Okay.
they believed they were fighting for the right to form a new country.
Perfect. Good. So remember, every time you have a question, you want to go back into the story. You can use what you know, but you can always look back as well. And where else could you look besides this page?
In another page behind or in front.
Good. Okay, so I want you to keep using the information from the text to give your answers. Good. Okay, Melvin, I'm going to flip it down so you can see. And I want you to start to read right there. What page are you on? Page 10? Okay, go ahead and start to read.
Besides the heavy fighting, people of the South faced serious problems with the economy. Many slaves escaped looking for freedom. This left the plantations without enough workers. For the first time, women and children had to help keep the farm running. Before the farm, there were only a few factories in the South. Crops like cotton were sold to factories in the North. The factories' workers used them to make goods such as clothes. These goods were then shipped back to the South. When the war began, President Lincoln ordered a blockade of South. The Union Navy set up ships along the southern coastline. These ships stopped boats with the supplies for the Confederacy. As the war went on, people in the South had fewer of the things they needed to survive. For instance, there wasn't enough clothes to make new clothing.
Okay, so I want us to think about this. I want us to think about why we're reading what we're reading, okay? So we know about the Civil War. We talked about it in social studies. But why do you think we're reading a book like this, where they're showing you women and children, where they're showing you soldiers, where they're talking about all the hardships? Why do you think we're reading a book like this?
So we can remember so we will know what happened in the past with the war and what kind of music they used. So what kind of music they put on from the past.
So do you think the music would be the most important part of a book that has the title The Civil War, Life Back Home? You think the music is what the author wants to try? What do you think the author is trying to tell us about war and people back home?
We're talking about what happened in the war and what they used to do back in time.
Okay, so that's just giving us information, but I want us to think a little bit more about when they talked about the women, the children, how did war affect them? What did they tell us in the story itself?
That when their husbands and their children, they were when the Civil War started, they had to go somewhere safe.
Okay, so they had to find safety so they weren't hurt themselves.
Yeah, because they sometimes put Civil War in the streets.
Yeah, the war could be right by their homes, so they had destruction. And then why don't you reread this sentence? This is probably one of the hardest things that people had to go through.
People on both sides lost husbands, fathers, and brothers.
What does that mean?
That they lost some family members.
And what does it mean if you lose somebody?
That they died.
Yes, so what would that be like for the children?
Really sad
Mhm.
and alone and nobody to take care of them.
Okay, so as you read sometimes, I want you to think about when the author gives you information, not only are they trying to teach you about the war, but like I mentioned, I think it was to Park, you want to think about how it affected everybody else too, okay? Good, close up your books and... Oh, good. Yes, we talked about you remember what?
made me cry. It's so sad.
Yes, Claire Barton, remember we did, she formed the Red Cross. Okay, so we are going to share with the group, Deja, tell the group what we talked about and what I heard you say.
We talked about some people had to they put guns and uniforms and to keep the spirits up. So
And what strategy did you use to know that information? Not always your background knowledge, but what did you actually have to do?
reread it.
Okay, good. Melvin, I heard you say?
That some people had guns, uniforms for the war,
How did she get that information though? That's the most important thing. How did she find out?
when she looked at the picture and then she read the information and then talked about it.
Good, okay. Who else wants to share? Because a lot of us talk about similar things. Ronnie?
We were talking about if you don't understand a paragraph, look in the paragraph behind it or in front of it, or just keep on reading and it might tell you what the paragraph is.
Good. Daniel, I heard you say?
I heard you say if you're on a paragraph and you want to find something, you can look behind the paragraph or in front of the paragraph or keep reading.
Good. Heart.
We talked about that it didn't affect only the soldiers, it affected everyone in the country.
Absolutely. That was the purpose. That's the author's message here, that war, Deja, doesn't affect just soldiers. What did you hear him say?
They affect the children and the parents.
And you even just said now, how did it affect you when you were reading this and you're looking at...
Cry because it was sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Heart.
We talked about they lose their brothers, fathers, and husbands.
Absolutely. So as you read, really look at what the author tells you about these things. Sometimes we don't always think about war because we don't see it all the time, but when we read about losing husbands and brothers and fathers, that information makes us make a better connection with the story. And now we know why we're reading what we're reading, right? Good. Okay. Thank you.